Good morning, boys and girls. Today we're back to story time with Little House on the Prairie by Laura Ingalls Wilder. We're on chapter 5. It's called The House on the Prairie. And baby Susan is asleep right now, but I'm not sure she will be at the end of this chapter because we are going to meet a real character in this story. And you'll find out what I'm talking about in a little bit. So here we go. Chapter 5. The House on the Prairie. Laura and Mary were up early next morning, earlier than the sun. They ate their breakfast of cornmeal mush and with prairie hen gravy and hurried to help Ma with the dishes. Pa was loading everything else into the wagon and hitching up Pet and Patty. When the sun rose, they were driving on across the prairie. There was no road now. Pet and Patty waded through the grasses, and the wagon left behind it only the tracks of its wheels. Before noon, Pa said, "Whoa!" The wagon stopped. "Here we are, Caroline," he said, "right here. We'll build our house." Laura and Mary scrambled over the feed box and dropped to the ground in a hurry. All along them there was nothing but grassy prairie spreading to the edge of the sky. Quite near them, to the north, the creek bottoms lay below the prairie. Some darker green tree tops showed, and beyond them bits of the rim of earthen bluffs held up the prairie's grasses. Far away to the east, a broken line of different greens lay on the prairie, and Pa said that was the river. Now here's a beautiful picture, boys and girls, of the Ingalls moving across the prairie. And as you can see over here, I know Mrs. McDonald's taught you about this, where the sky and the land meet in a picture or in real life. That's called yep, you guessed it, the horizon. That's just a gorgeous picture. "That is the Verdigris River," he said, pointing it out to Ma. Right away he and Ma began to unload the wagon. They took out everything and piled it on the ground. They took off the wagon cover and put it over the pile. Then they took even the wagon box off while Laura and Mary and Jack watched. So Pa has come to a spot where he's decided that he would like to build their new home out in the middle of the prairie in Kansas. The wagon had been home for a long time. Now there was nothing left of it but the four wheels and the parts that connected them. So, boys and girls, here's a picture of their wagon. So Pa took off the canvas cover, the wagon bows, and he even took off this part, the wagon box. So all that's left now is the wheels and the axles. So all this part has been taken off. And everything in the wagon is sitting on the ground now, covered up by the canvas. Pet and Patty were still hitched to the tongue. Pa took a bucket and his axe, and sitting on this skeleton wagon, he drove away. He drove right down into the prairie, out of sight. "Where's Pa going?" Laura asked, and Ma said, "He's going to get a load of logs from the creek bottoms." It was strange and frightening to be left without the wagon on the high prairie. The land and the sky seemed too large, and Laura felt small. She wanted to hide and be still in the tall grass, like a little prairie chicken, but she didn't. She helped Ma, while Mary sat on the grass and minded baby Carrie. First, Laura and Mary made the beds under the wagon-cover tent. Then Ma arranged the boxes and bundles, while Laura pulled all the grass from a space in front of the tent. That made a bare place for the fire. They couldn't start the fire until Pa brought wood. So the wagon cover, the canvas, is now serving as their new home, which is a tent for now. There was nothing more to do, so Laura explored a little. She did not go far from the tent. but she found a strange little kind of tunnel in the grass. You'd never notice it if you looked across the waving grass tops, but when you came to it, there it was, a narrow, straight, hard path down between the grass stems. It went out into the endless prairie. So can you picture this in your mind, boys and girls? There's this tall grass, but way down at the bottom of the grass towards the ground, Laura's found this tunnel that goes through the grass. Laura went along it a little way. She went slowly and more slowly. Then she stood still and felt strange. Now, boys and girls, here you've seen the word queer a couple of times. And queer is an old-fashioned word for strange. So she turned around and came back quickly. When she looked over her shoulder, there wasn't anything there, but she hurried. When Pa came riding back on a load of logs, Laura told him about the path. He said he had seen it yesterday. It's some old trail, he said. That night, by the fire, Laura asked again when she would see a papoose, but Pa didn't know. He said you never saw Indians unless they wanted you to see them. He said he had seen Indians when he was a boy in New York State, but Laura never had. She knew they were wild men with red skins, and their hatchets were called tomahawks. Pa knew all about wild animals, so he must know about wild men, too. Laura thought he would show her a papoose some day, just as he had shown her fawns and little bears and wolves. For days, Pa hauled logs. He made 2 piles of them, one for the house and one for the stable. There began to be a road where he drove back and forth to the creek bottoms. And at night, on their picket lines, Pet and Patty ate the grass, till it was short and stubby, all around the log piles. So, if you want to build something today, you would go to the lumber yard or to a KBS or Menards or Fleet Farm and you'd buy wood. But back in these days, there were no stores to go buy wood at, so Pa had to go to the creek bottoms every day, cut down trees, cut all the branches off of them, and bring them back on the wagon. Can you imagine what hard work that would be? Pa had to be very, very, very strong. Pa began the house first. He paced off the size of it on the ground. That means he walked. So he didn't have a tape measure like we do today to build things. He used his feet. So he just measured where he's going to put the house using his feet. Then with his spade, or his shovel, he dug a shallow little hollow along 2 sides of that space. In these hollows he rolled 2 logs, 2 of the biggest logs. They were sound, strong logs, because they must hold up the house. They were called sills. So basically what Pa did, boys and girls, is he took his shovel and he dug basically a little channel or a little hollow in the ground. So then what he did is the big strong logs would fit into that. Oops, sorry, that didn't happen. Let me fold this a little more. That was too deep of a hollow. So he dug a little trench basically in the ground, and pretend this paper is the trench, and he took his log, that's the pen, and he put those into the trench. Those are the 2 big strong logs that would hold up the house. Then Pa chose 2 more strong big logs, and he rolled these logs onto the ends of the sills so that they made a hollow square. So what he's doing now, boys and girls, is he's basically taking the sills that are in the ground like this, and he's taking 2 other logs and putting them on top. Now, if you ever built with Lincoln logs, it's the same type of thing. Now with his axe, he cut a wide, deep notch near the end of these logs. So as you can see here, here's the sill log, and here's the log that goes across, and he's cutting notches into these. And if you can imagine, what he's going to do is he's going to roll this log into that notch, so the logs will stay together. Again, kind of like Lincoln logs. He cut these notches out of the top of the log, but with his eye he measured the sills, and he cut the notches so that they would fit halfway around the sill. So yes, this notch will fit halfway around this sill. When the notches were cut, he rolled the logs over, and the notches fitted down over the sill. That finished the foundation of the house. It was now 1 log high. The sills were half buried in the ground, and the logs on their ends fitted snugly to the ground. At the corners where they crossed, the notches let them fit together so that they were no thicker than 1 log, and the 2 ends stuck out beyond the notches. So here's the notches that are going to go, this notch will go into that notch. And this will be a nice tight fit because Pa was able to, he's so smart, he's able to figure that out, how he can make these sills just right. He's very, very talented. People in these days were very, very smart in the things that they could do, because they didn't have tools like we have today. And they were very strong too, because if you've ever tried to cut log with an axe, it's a lot of work. Next day, Pa began the walls. From each side he rolled up a log, and he notched its end so that it fitted down over the end logs. Then he rolled up logs from the ends, and notched them so that they fitted down over the side logs. Now the whole house was 2 logs high, again just like building with Lincoln logs. The logs fitted solidly together at the corners, but no log is ever perfectly straight, and all the logs are bigger at one end than at the other end, so that there were cracks left between them all along the walls. But that did not matter, because Pa would chink those cracks. Yeah, so when you build this house, boys and girls, when you put the logs together like this, it kind of looks like this. There's holes between the logs. So Pa will have to chink those holes because he doesn't want the wind getting in. And we'll learn what chinking is in a little bit. All by himself, he built the house 3 logs high. Then Ma helped him. Pa lifted one end of the log onto the wall. Then Ma held it while he lifted the other end. He stood up on the wall to cut the notches, and Ma helped roll and hold the log while he settled it where it should be to make the corner perfectly square. So log by log, they built the walls higher till they were pretty high, and Laura couldn't get over them anymore. She was tired of watching Pa and Ma build the house, and she went into the tall grass exploring. Suddenly she heard Pa shout, "Let go! Get out from under!" The big heavy log was sliding. Pa was trying to hold up its end to keep it from falling on Ma, but he couldn't. It crashed down. Laura saw Ma huddled on the ground. Oh no. Boys and girls, this log fell from way up here onto Ma. And here is a picture of Pa trying to lift the log off of Ma. Yikes. Dun, dun, dun! But as you can see in this picture, the house is now 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 logs high. So Pa had to stand up here with his axe while Ma held the log up and chopped the notches, but unfortunately the log fell. She got to Ma as quickly as Pa did. Pa knelt down and called Ma in a dreadful voice, and Ma gasped, "I'm all right." The log was on her foot. Pa lifted the log, and Ma pulled her foot out from under it. Pa felt her to see if any bones were broken. And we have to stop there, boys and girls, because we run out of time. I will finish the chapter as soon as I get this video loaded onto our YouTube channel.